It is the spring of 1942. Nazi submarines are sinking American ships faster than they can be built. London is still burning from the Blitz. In the Pacific, Japan has just taken Singapore and is advancing everywhere. The United States has been at war for only 4 months, but already the country is running out of everything, especially heavy bombers. The mighty B-17 Flying Fortress, the 4-engine giant that is supposed to carry the war to Hitler's heartland, is being produced at a painfully slow pace. At the current rate, the Army Air Forces will not have enough bombers to matter until 1944 or 1945, far too late. In Seattle, at Boeing's Plant 2, workers are building B-17s the old-fashioned aircraft way. Small teams, hand-fitting parts, craftsmen taking pride in every rivet. The result looks beautiful, but only about 15 bombers roll out each month. 15. The Army needs hundreds, then thousands. President Roosevelt has called for 60,000 aircraft in 1942 alone. People in Washington whisper that it is impossible. One day in April 1942, a stocky, cigar-chewing man in his late 40s steps off a train in Seattle wearing a cheap suit and a fedora. His name is Charles E. Sorensen, but everyone calls him Cast Iron Charlie. He is production chief for Henry Ford at the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford has just been awarded a contract to build B-17s at a gigantic new plant still rising from the Michigan mud at Willow Run. The Army is desperate enough to give the job to a car maker who has never built a single airplane in his life. Sorensen has come to Boeing to see how the bomber is made. Boeing executives proudly show him around. They expect the car man to be impressed. Instead, after 2 days of watching, Sorensen pulls aside Philip G. Johnson, Boeing's president, and says quietly, "But doing it all wrong." Johnson bristles. Sorensen continues, "You build airplanes like you build cathedrals. We're going to build them like Model Ts." The Boeing men laugh until they realize he is serious. Sorensen goes home to Detroit and tells Henry Ford and his engineers, "Forget everything you think you know about aircraft production. We're going to take the heaviest, most complex bomber in the world and put on a moving assembly line, exactly like a car. 1 B-17 every hour. Not 15 a month, one every 60 minutes around the clock." Engineers from Boeing and the Army Air Forces say it cannot be done. The B-17 is 74 feet long, has a 104-foot wingspan, weighs 55,000 pounds loaded, and contains 1.2 million separate parts. A car is maybe 5,000 parts. The tolerances on an aircraft are measured in thousandths of an inch. Wings must be perfect, or the plane will not fly. One mistake, and men die. Sorensen listens, nods, and repeats, "We'll do it anyway." Back in Detroit, Willow Run is still half-built. The main building, designed by architect Albert Kahn, will be the largest single room under one roof in the world, almost half a mile long, a quarter-mile wide. The assembly line inside will be shaped like a giant L so that finished bombers can taxi out directly onto the airfield. But in early 1942, it is only concrete and steel skeletons. Sorensen assembles a team of the toughest production men Ford has ever produced. Men who lived through the brutal $5-day strikes, the Battle of the Overpass, men who turned out 4,000 cars a day at River Rouge. They arrive at Willow Run wearing fedoras and carrying slide rules. They look at the half-finished bomber plant and start swearing in 3 languages. The first problem, nobody knows how to build a B-17 except Boeing. The blueprints are a nightmare. Thousands of drawings, many hand-sketched, full of notes like fit to suit. Sorensen sends his men to Seattle again, this time with orders to tear apart a finished B-17 and measure every single part with micrometers. They bring back a complete bomber in pieces, label every rivet, every wire, every bracket. Then they redraw every single drawing so that any machinist in Michigan can understand it. Second problem, the wings. At Boeing, each wing is built on a stationary jig by skilled workers who shim and adjust until it is perfect. Takes days. Sorensen orders giant hydraulic presses and tools that can bend and form entire wing panels in minutes. He designs jigs that move along the line with the fuselage, so the wings are attached while everything is rolling forward at walking speed. Third problem, Women. By mid-1942, men are being drafted by the millions. Who will rivet the wings? Sorensen shrugs and says, women can rivet better than men. Smaller hands, more patient. Soon, Rosie the Riveter is not just a poster. She is real, and there are 40,000 of her at Willow Run. But the biggest problem is simply disbelief. Everyone, the Army, Congress, the press, even many at Ford, think Sorensen is crazy. Newspapers call Willow Run Sorensen's folly. Politicians demand investigations. Henry Ford himself wavers. Only one man never wavers, Cast Iron Charlie. By December 1942, the line is still not yet running, but the first sub-assemblies are moving. Sorensen stands on a catwalk above the half-mile floor, cigar clenched in his teeth, watching women in slacks and men in coveralls begin to bring the monster to life. He knows the clock is ticking. Every day the line is late. More Allied ships sink, more cities burn, more young men die. He turns to an aide and says, "Tell them to work faster. The boys in the sky can't wait." January 1943. Willow Run is freezing. The huge building has no proper heating yet. Breath hangs in the air like smoke. Outside, snow drifts against half-finished walls. Inside, 40,000 workers stamp their feet and curse the cold while they try to make the impossible happen. The assembly line itself is a living thing now, though it stumbles more than it walks. It is supposed to move 1 foot every 6 minutes, but it jerks, stops, starts again. A fuselage hangs in midair for hours because a single bracket is missing. A wing arrives upside down. Someone has drilled holes in the wrong place, and an entire tail section has to be scrapped. Every delay costs thousands of dollars, and, more importantly, weeks of time the war cannot spare. Sorensen walks the line every single day, from dawn until long after midnight. He wears the same gray fedora and the same scowl. When something stops, he does not shout. He simply stands there, silent, chewing his cigar until the foreman feels the pressure like a physical weight and men start running. The workers call it the Sorensen stare. It is more effective than any screaming. The press is brutal. The Detroit News runs a front-page photograph of a single lonely B-17 sitting on the new runway with the headline, "Willow Run's first and last." Senators arrive in fur coats to hold hearings in the half-empty cafeteria. They demand to know why Ford has spent $100 million of the taxpayers' money and has almost nothing to show for it. One congressman calls Sorensen a Detroit butcher who thinks he can carve airplanes the way he carves fenders. Sorensen refuses to testify in public. He sends a short letter. "Come back when the line is running. Then we will talk." In February, the line finally creeps forward for an entire shift without stopping. At the end of the great L-shaped building, a complete B-17F, olive drab and gleaming, rolls out into the Michigan snow. The workers cheer themselves hoarse. Sorensen does not smile. He looks at his watch and says, "Too slow. 5 days from raw material to finished bomber. We need less than 1 day." The Army test pilot climbs in, starts the 4 Wright Cyclone engines, and takes off right from the factory runway. The plane circles once and lands perfectly. The Army inspector signs the papers. 1 bomber, the first ever built anywhere outside Seattle. Sorensen lights another cigar and tells his assistant Ed Martin, "That's nice. Now do it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that." But the problems are far from over. The B-17 is changing almost every week. The Army wants more guns, more armor, new radios, new superchargers. Every change means new parts, new tools, new drawings. Boeing sends change orders by the hundreds. Each one threatens to stop the line dead. Sorensen makes a rule that becomes legend. No change order is allowed to delay the line by even 1 hour. If the Army wants something new, they must deliver the modified parts to the exact station on the exact day the old part would have arrived. If they are late, the old part goes in and the plane flies anyway. The Army generals scream. Sorensen tells them, "You want perfect bombers in 1945 or good bombers in 1943? Choose." Another crisis. Aluminium. America is short of it. Every beer can, every lipstick tube, every kitchen pot is being collected for the war effort, and still there is not enough. The B-17 needs hundreds of pounds of aluminium sheet for every plane. Sorensen's buyers scour the country. They find a warehouse full of aluminium roofing from a 1939 World's Fair. They strip the skin off abandoned brewery tanks. One desperate week, they buy thousands of aluminium coffins intended for the South American market and melt them down. No one outside the purchasing department ever knows. By March 1943, the line is producing one bomber every workday. Still not enough. The workers are now on 3 shifts, 24 hours a day. The giant building never sleeps. At night, it is lit by thousands of bare bulbs and the blue sparks of welding torches. Women work the swing shift and the graveyard shift, leaving children with neighbors or mothers-in-law. Teenagers lie about their age to get jobs. A blind man works in the tool crib because his fingers can identify any part by touch faster than sighted men can read the labels. Sorensen starts speed-up weeks. Anyone who finds a way to save 30 seconds on any operation gets a $50 war bond and his name on a big board. Soon the suggestions pour in: a different way to hold the drill, a jig turned 90 degrees, a bucket of rivets moves 6 feet closer to the riveter's hand. 30 seconds here, 20 seconds there. It adds up. By April, the line is moving 1 foot every 4 minutes instead of 6. In May 1943, something happens that no one at Willow Run ever forgets. A B-17 built at Willow Run, serial number 42 to 30,607, takes off from Maine on its way to England. Over the Atlantic, it runs into a gale. The pilot radios that 2 engines are out and the plane is icing up. Everyone expects the worst. Hours later, the same plane lands safely in Newfoundland. The crew sends a telegram to Willow Run. Tell the girls back home their rivets held. We're okay. The telegram is read over the factory loudspeakers. 40,000 workers stop what they are doing and cheer until the rafters shake. Even Sorensen, standing on the catwalk, takes the cigar out of his mouth and claps once hard like a pistol shot. That same month, the production figures finally cross 100 bombers. The newspapers that called it Sorensen's folly now call it the Detroit miracle. Politicians who wanted investigations now want their pictures taken shaking Sorensen's hand. He refuses most of them, but the real test is still coming. In July 1943, the combined chiefs of staff in Washington draw up plans for something never attempted before: massive daylight bombing raids deep into Germany itself. The target list includes ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt, aircraft factories at Regensburg, oil refineries in Ploesti. To make these raids possible, the 8th Air Force in England needs hundreds more B-17s immediately. The eyes of the free world turn to a half-mile-long building in Michigan where ordinary Americans, housewives, farmers' sons, grandmothers, former bootleggers, are trying to outrun time itself. Sorensen gathers his foreman on the night shift and tells them only 8 words. 1 bomber every 63 minutes starts now. The line roars louder into the Michigan darkness. July 1943. The temperature inside Willow Run reaches 110 degrees Fahrenheit, even with every door open. The aluminium skin of the fuselages is too hot to touch without gloves. Workers drink salt tablets by the handful and still faint at their stations. The line cannot stop. 1 bomber every 63 minutes. That is the new heartbeat of the war. Sorensen has removed every clock from the factory floor. Only one huge electric timer remains, mounted above the final station like a guillotine. It shows the minutes until the next airplane must roll out the big doors. When the timer hits 0 and no bomber appears, a red light flashes and a klaxon howls for exactly 10 seconds. Everyone in the half-mile building hears it and feels shame. It has not sounded in 9 days. The workers have invented their own language. A Willow Run minute is any length of time a foreman claimed a repair will take. Usually turns out to be an hour. A Sorensen minute is the opposite, 60 actual seconds in which miracles are expected. The line now begins not with aluminium sheet, but with a single bolt dropped into a bin at Station 1 at 12:01 a.m. 63 minutes later, at 2:04 a.m., a complete B-17 must be ready to start its engines. Every station has its own subtimer. If Station 17 falls behind by 4 minutes, Station 18 has to make it up, or the red light and klaxon. The women riveters have become so fast that the men who buck the rivets, holding the heavy bar on the inside, cannot keep up. So the women teach other women to buck. Soon entire crews are female. They wear slacks and bandanas and develop arms like stevedores. The most famous is Rose Monroe, a Kentucky widow with 2 small children. A newsreel crew films her driving rivets with a pneumatic gun as fast as a machine gun. The War Department turns her into Rosie the Riveter, and her face goes up on posters across America. She keeps working 12-hour shifts and still finds time to write letters to her brothers fighting in Italy. In August 1943, the impossible becomes routine. The big doors open 23 times in a single day, and 23 B-17s taxi out one after another, engines roaring, propellers flashing in the sun. Photographers from Life magazine lie on the ground to catch the spectacle. An endless line of flying fortresses rolling off the world's biggest assembly line like cars at River Rouge. The article is titled Arsenal of Democracy, Made in Detroit. But the human cost is brutal. Divorces skyrocket. Children grow up not recognizing their fathers. A worker on the night shift falls asleep at his drill press and loses 3 fingers. Another, exhausted after 16 hours, walks into a spinning propeller and is killed instantly. Sorensen orders a simple wooden cross painted on the wall where the man died, and work resumes 10 minutes later. The Army keeps demanding more changes. Now they want the new chin turret with twin .50 calibers to fight head-on attacks by German fighters. Installing it means cutting a hole in the nose and completely redesigning the forward fuselage. Boeing says it will take 6 months to retool. Sorensen gives his engineers 4 days. They work 96 hours without sleep, living on coffee and Benzedrine. On the 5th day, the first chin turret B-17G rolls out exactly on schedule. The Boeing liaison officer stands with his mouth open. Sorensen walks past and says without stopping, "Send the bill to Hitler." By October 1943, Willow Run alone is producing more B-17s than the entire American aircraft industry produced in all of 1941. The total for the month is 231 bombers. The Army's desperate shortage is turning into a surplus. Pilots finishing training in Texas and Florida have planes waiting for them the day they get their wings. Across the Atlantic, the 8th Air Force is growing from a few battered squadrons into a sky-darkening armada. The Germans notice. In Berlin, Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, reads captured American newspapers with growing alarm. He writes in his diary, "The war is being decided in a factory near Detroit. Every fortnight, they double production again. We have no answer to this." In November, Sorensen finally allows himself 1 day off. He drives to a small lake in northern Michigan with his wife and grown daughter. They rent a rowboat. Halfway across the lake, he lights a cigar, looks at the quiet water, and suddenly starts to shake. His daughter holds him while he cries without sound for 10 minutes. Then he wipes his face, rows back, and is on the floor at Willow Run by 5 a.m. the next day. December 1943. The timer now reads 60 minutes flat. 1 bomber every hour of every day. Christmas lights are strung along the rafters, but no one takes the day off. At 11:03 p.m. on Christmas Eve, the 365th bomber of the month rolls out. The workers have built 1 B-17 for every day of the year. They sing Silent Night, standing on the wings of the newest fortress, voices echoing in the cavernous building. Sorensen stands on the catwalk in his fedora and overcoat. Snow is falling outside the open doors. He watches the plane taxi away, lights winking red and green in the darkness. For the first time in 2 years, he speaks aloud what he has never admitted even to his wife. "We're going to win," he says quietly. "Those bastards don't know it yet, but we're going to win." The red timer resets to 60:00. The line never stops. January 1944. Willow Run has become something no one can quite explain to outsiders. It is no longer a factory. It is a living organism that breathes aluminium and exhales four-engine bombers. The half-mile floor is a single moving river of olive-drab steel. From the final assembly doors, a new B-17G now emerges every 58 minutes. The klaxon that once brought shame has not sounded in 73 days. Workers have nailed a broom to the wall above the big timer. The line is officially swept clean of delays. The rest of the world is finally waking up to what Detroit has done. In England, the 8th Air Force now has more than 1,000 heavy bombers, almost all of them built at Willow Run or by companies that copied Sorensen's methods. The RAF night raids are punishing Germany, but it is the American daylight fleets that terrify the Luftwaffe. When the fortresses appear, sometimes 400, sometimes 800 at a time, the German fighters rise to meet them and are shot from the sky in droves. American escort fighters, the long-range P-51 Mustangs, are now arriving in numbers too, and the Luftwaffe begins to bleed to death over its own cities. On January 11th, 1944, 650 heavy bombers strike aircraft plants at Ostersleben, Halberstadt, and Brunswick. 200 German fighters attack. 60 American bombers are lost. A terrible day, yet 570 return. The plants are wrecked. German pilots report that the sky is black with fortresses. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, who once boasted that no enemy bomber would ever reach Berlin, now refuses to take telephone calls from the front. Back in Michigan, the workers hear the casualty lists on the radio and work harder. A new tradition begins. Every time a Willow Run plane is reported lost, the crew chief who built it paints the plane's name and serial number on a blackboard near the cafeteria. By spring, there are hundreds of names. No one is ever told to take the board down. Sorensen receives a letter from General Henry H. Hap Arnold, commander of the entire Army Air Forces. It is only 2 sentences long. Charlie, whatever you are doing, do it twice as fast. The sooner we have 2,000 bombers over Germany every day, the sooner our boys come home. Sorensen pins the letter above the big timer. The next day, the pace drops to 55 minutes per airplane. The women of Willow Run have become national heroes. Eleanor Roosevelt visits in February, wearing a fur coat against the Michigan winter. She walks the line with Sorensen and stops at every station to shake hands. When she reaches the riveting platforms, a tiny grandmother from West Virginia named Mary Smith shows the First Lady how she can drive 800 rivets an hour without missing one. Mrs. Roosevelt tries the pneumatic gun, fires 3 shots, and laughs like a girl. The photograph runs in every newspaper in the free world. By March 1944, Willow Run reaches a figure no one thought possible: 18 bombers in a single day. The Army immediately orders the plant to slow down. There are now more B-17s than trained crews to fly them. Sorensen ignores the order. He converts half the line to the new B-24 Liberator, another 4 project, and keeps the other half running B-17s at full speed. The surplus bombers are flown to modification centers where civilian technicians install radar, extra fuel tanks, and stripped interiors to turn them into unarmed transports for D-Day. Nothing is wasted. In April, Sorensen is called to Washington. The Senate Truman Committee, which once investigated waste at Willow Run, now wants to give him a medal. He refuses to attend the ceremony. Instead, he sends a telegram. If the committee wants to pin a medal on someone, pin on the night shift riveter who hasn't seen her kids in daylight for 2 years. I'm busy. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, Willow Run bombers are everywhere. Some tow gliders across the channel. Others drop paratroopers over Normandy. High above, entire groups of B-17s fly, fake missions to draw the Luftwaffe away from the beaches. The German fighter force rises, meets overwhelming numbers, and is almost wiped out in a single morning. That same week, a young 8th Air Force pilot named Robert Rosenthal lands his battered B-17, named Royal Flush, an emergency field in England. The airplane has 110 documented holes, 2 engines dead, and half the tail shot away, yet it still flew 300 miles home. Rosenthal climbs down, looks at the data plate on the fuselage, and sees it was built at Willow Run in February 1944. He writes a letter that is read over the factory loudspeakers. To the workers of Willow Run, you do not know me, but I know you. Today you saved the lives of 10 American boys. Thank you is not enough. The letter is framed and hung beside the blackboard of lost aircraft. No one cries. They simply go back to work faster. In July 1944, the 1,000-bomber raids become routine. On one mission to Munich, 1,247 heavy bombers take part. German flak and fighters manage to shoot down only 14. The Luftwaffe is finished as an effective force. Albert Speer writes to Hitler that Germany has lost the air war irrevocably, and the reason is one factory in America that we never succeeded in bombing. By August 1944, Willow Run has delivered its 5,000th B-17. The plant begins to wind down bomber production. The war in Europe is visibly crumbling. Some workers are laid off for the first time in 3 years. They leave the building quietly, carrying lunch boxes, unsure what to do with evenings and weekends again. Sorensen walks the line one last time at night. It is almost silent now, only a skeleton crew finishing the final contracts. He stops at the big timer, which has been stopped forever at midnight. He reaches up, pulls the master switch, and the thousands of lights along the half-mile ceiling go dark one by one. For the first time in nearly 3 years, Willow Run is quiet. He stands alone in the darkness, listening to the echo of his own footsteps, and finally allows himself to feel what he has not felt since 1941: exhaustion, pride, and something close to peace. Outside, the Michigan dawn is breaking pale and gold over the airfield where 8,685 B-17s were born. September 1944. The war in Europe is no longer a question of if, but only of when. The Red Army is across the Vistula. American armies have broken out of Normandy and are racing for the Rhine. The Luftwaffe has become a ghost. On most days now, the great fleets of B-17s cross Germany almost unopposed. They no longer need fighter escort to Berlin. The bombers simply fly over the ruins of the Third Reich and drop their loads on what is left. At Willow Run, the Great Line has gone quiet. The last B-17, serial number 44 to 85,790, rolled out on June 28, 1945, 2 months after VE Day and 1 month before Hiroshima. A small ceremony was held. A band played. A general made a speech. Sorensen did not attend. He had already left the plant weeks earlier without telling anyone. He simply walked out one evening, got into his Ford sedan, and drove home to Dearborn. He never returned. The official total is staggering. From the first faltering bomber in October 1942 to the last in June 1945, Willow Run delivered 8,685 completed aircraft, 6,791 B-17s, and 1,894 B-24s. One factory, one man's stubborn vision, one every 58 minutes at peak. But numbers never tell the whole story. The real story is the quiet one. It is the story of a 19-year-old girl from Alabama who learned to weld upside down inside a wing and sent every paycheck home so her little brother could stay in school. He graduated university in 1951 and became an aeronautical engineer. He still has her last letter, stained with hydraulic fluid. It is the story of a Polish machinist who escaped Warsaw in 1939, worked the night shift at Willow Run, and every time a new bomber took off, he whispered the names of streets in his destroyed city that the plane would soon fly over. It is the story of a Detroit grandmother who operated a crane for 16 hours a day and never once missed a lift, even after her only son was killed over Regensburg. She kept his last letter in her overall pocket and touched it every time she swung a 3,000-pound Wright Cyclone engine into place. And it is the story of 10-man crews over Germany in the terrible winter of 1943 to 44 who looked out of their plexiglass windows at dawn and saw hundreds of other fortresses forming up around them, wingtip to wingtip, and knew in their bones, that the factory back home had kept its promise. They were no longer alone. In May 1945, Colonel Curtis LeMay, later famous for firebombing Japan, visited Willow Run on his way home from Europe. He walked the silent floor with Sorensen's former deputy, Meade Bricker. LeMay stopped beneath the darkened lights, looked the length of the half-mile building, and said very softly, "This place won the war." He was not exaggerating. Historians still argue about turning points, Stalingrad, El Alamein, Midway, D-Day, but inside the United States Army Air Forces, there has never been any argument at all. The moment the balance tipped was the spring and summer of 1943, when a number of heavy bombers suddenly leapt from a few hundred to many thousands, and the Luftwaffe discovered it could no longer replace its losses. That was the moment Germany lost the air, and therefore the war. And that moment happened because one tough, cigar-chewing production man from Detroit refused to accept the word impossible. Charles E. Sorensen never wrote a book. He refused most interviews. When the war ended, he went back to making cars. He retired in 1951, bought a small farm in northern Michigan, and spent his mornings fishing and his evenings reading history books about ancient Rome. He died quietly in 1963 at the age of 81. Almost no newspapers outside Detroit carried the obituary. But every year on the first Saturday in June, a few hundred gray-haired men and women, former riveters, buckers, inspectors, crane operators, gather at the Yankee Air Museum beside the old Willow Run airfield. They bring folding chairs and thermos flasks. They walk slowly past the restored B-17G, named Yankee Lady, that the museum keeps flying. They lay flowers beneath a simple bronze plaque that lists no battles, no dates, only these words: "To the men and women of Willow Run, who built the arsenal of democracy. One rivet, 1 minute, one airplane at a time. Because of you, the sky stayed ours." They stand in silence for a minute, exactly 1 minute, because that is how long it once took to give the world another flying fortress. Then they go home. The building itself is mostly gone now, torn down for a warehouse. Only a small part of the original Albert Kahn structure remains. But if you visit on a quiet evening and the wind is right, old-timers say you can still hear it. The low thunder of Wright's Cyclone engines turning up, the hiss of pneumatic guns, the steady heartbeat of a line that never stopped. And somewhere in the distance, a big timer clicks down to 58 minutes and starts again. The boys in the sky never had to wait.